Russian officer, a great number of Frenchmen might die whom perhaps they could have saved. It was a specialty with her, caring for soldiers. She had been in Crimea, in Italy, in Austria, and, in telling of her campaigns, she revealed herself as one of those religious aides to drums and trumpets who seem made to follow camps, pick up the wounded in the thick of battle, and, better than an officer, subdue with a word great bands of undisciplined recruits. A true, good sister of the Rataplin, whose ravaged face, marked with innumerable scars, appeared the image of the devastation of war. No one could speak after her, so excellent seemed the effect of her words. As soon as the repast was ended, they quickly went up to their rooms, with the purpose of not coming down the next day until late in the morning. The luncheon was quiet. They had given the grain of seed time to germinate and bear fruit. The Countess proposed that they take a walk in the afternoon. The Count, being agreeably inclined, gave an arm to Ball of Fat and walked behind the others with her. He talked to her in a familiar, paternal tone, a little disdainful, after the manner of men having girls in their employ, calling her "my dear child," from the height of his social position, of his undisputed honor. He reached the vital part of the question at once. "Then you prefer to leave us here, exposed to the violences which follow a defeat, rather than consent to a favor which you have so often given in your life?" Ball of Fat answered nothing. Then he tried to reach her through gentleness, reason, and then the sentiments. He knew how to remain the Count, even while showing himself gallant, or complimentary, or very amiable if it became necessary. He exalted the service that she would render them, and spoke of her appreciation, then suddenly became gaily familiar, and said, "And you know, my dear, it would be something for him to boast of that he had known a pretty girl, something it is difficult to find in his country." Ball of Fat did not answer, but joined the rest of the party. As soon as they entered the house, she went to her room, and did not appear again. The disquiet was extreme. What were they to do? If she continued to resist, what an embarrassment! The dinner hour struck. They waited in vain. Mr. Follenby finally entered and said that Miss Roussette was indisposed and would not be at the table. Everybody pricked up his ears. The Count went to the innkeeper and said in a low voice, "Is he in there?" "Yes." For convenience, he said nothing to his companions, but made a slight sign with his head. Immediately a great sigh of relief went up from every breast, and a light appeared in their faces. Luceau cried out, "Holy Christopher! I pay for the champagne if there is any to be found in the establishment." And Mrs. Luceau was pained to see the proprietor return with 4-quart bottles in his hands. Each one had suddenly become communicative and buoyant. A wanton joy filled their hearts. The Count suddenly perceived that Mrs. Carré-Lamadon was charming. The manufacturer paid compliments to the Countess. The conversation was lively, gay, full of touches. Suddenly, Luceau, with anxious face and hand upraised, called out, "Silence!" Everybody was silent, surprised, already frightened. Then he listened intently and said, "Shh." His 2 eyes and his hands raised toward the ceiling, listening, and then continuing in his natural voice, "All right, all goes well." They failed to comprehend at first, but soon all laughed. At the end of a quarter of an hour he began the same farce again, renewing it occasionally during the whole afternoon. And he pretended to call to someone in the story above, giving him advice in a double meaning, drawn from the fountainhead, the mind of a commercial traveler. For some moments he would assume a sad air, breathing in a whisper, "Poor girl!" Then he would murmur between his teeth with an appearance of rage, "Ugh! That scamp of a Prussian!" Sometimes, at a moment when no more was thought about it, he would say, in an affected voice, many times over, "Enough! Enough!" and add, as if speaking to himself, "If we could only see her again, it isn't necessary that he should kill her, the wretch." Although these jokes were in deplorable taste, they amused all, and wounded no one, for indignation, like other things, depends upon its surroundings, and the atmosphere which had been gradually created around them was charged with sensual thoughts. At the dessert, the women themselves made some delicate and discreet allusions. Their eyes glistened. They had drunk much. The Count, who preserved, even in his flights, his grand appearance of gravity, made a comparison, much relished, upon the subject of those wintering at the pole, and the joy of shipwrecked sailors who saw an opening toward the south. Loiseau suddenly arose, a glass of champagne in his hand, and said, "I drink to our deliverance." Everybody was on his feet. They shouted in agreement. Even the two good sisters consented to touch their lips to the froth of the wine which they had never before tasted. They declared that it tasted like charged lemonade, only much nicer. Loiseau resumed, "It is unfortunate that we have no piano, for we might make up a quadrille." Cornadet had not said a word, nor made a gesture. He appeared plunged in very grave thoughts, and made sometimes a furious motion, so that his great beard seemed to wish to free itself. Finally, toward midnight, as they were separating, Loiseau, who was staggering, touched him suddenly on the stomach, and said to him in a stammer, "You are not very funny this evening. You have said nothing, citizen." Then Cornadet raised his head brusquely, and, casting a brilliant, terrible glance around the company, said, "I tell you all that you have been guilty of infamy." He rose, went to the door, and again repeated, "Infamy, I say," and disappeared. This made a coldness at first. Loiseau, interlocutor, was stupefied. But he recovered immediately, and laughed heartily as he said, "He is very green, my friends, he is very green." And then, as they did not comprehend, he told them about the mysteries of the corridor. Then there was a return of gaiety. The women behaved like lunatics. The Count and Mr. Carré-Lamadon wept from the force of their laughter. They could not believe it. "How is that? Are you sure?" "I tell you I saw it." "And she refused?" "Yes, because the Prussian officer was in the next room." "Impossible." "I swear it." The Count was stifled with laughter. The industrial gentleman held his sides with both hands. Loiseau continued, "And now you understand why he saw nothing funny this evening. No, nothing at all." And the three started out half ill, suffocated. They separated. But Mrs. Loiseau, who was of a spiteful nature, remarked to her husband as they were getting into bed that grisette of a little Carré-Lamadon was yellow with envy all the evening. "You know," she continued, "how some women will take to a uniform, whether it be French or Prussian. It is all the same to them. Oh, what a pity!" And all night, in the darkness of the corridor, there were to be heard light noises like whisperings and walkings in bare feet, and imperceptible creakings. They did not go to sleep until late, that is sure, for there were threads of light shining under the doors for a long time. The champagne had its effect. They say it troubles sleep. The next day a clear winter's sun made the snow very brilliant. The